Hi, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. And we're here today with Ted Potrikus, the Executive Vice President and Director of Gov't Relations at the Retail Council of New York State. In today's session is about the new Customer Bill of Rights. And all of us have been following the recent news and events here in New York City right before the holidays. Our industry was accused of practicing racial profiling in our external theft shoplifting programs. And while we're not here today to address those accusations, we can say without a doubt that there isn't a retailer in the United States that practices racial profiling in any program. However, with the mere fact that it was brought up and gained momentum in the press, we at the Daily felt that it was warranted this session. Additionally, given the outcome of all of the meetings surrounding these events and the creation of this new Customer Bill of Rights, we wanted to bring to you an industry leader that participated in the meetings and helped create this new Customer Bill of Rights. And before we get started, I'd just like to say that as the publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and following the events as closely as we did, it's our opinion that these incidents were fueled by the credit card fraud epidemic we're facing as a nation, and coupled with the New York Police Department's stop-and-frisk policy. And when you couple those two, what you have is a powder keg waiting to blow up. And that's exactly what happened. Now, let's get to the new Customer Bill of Rights. It's displayed here on the monitor and is easily referenced on the internet, and feel free to do so. Ted, first I'd like to thank you for joining us here
today.
Thank
you for having me, very much.
And I'd like to ask you to give us a quick synopsis of what led to its creation from the Retail Council's perspective.
Sure.
And how it came together, which is a huge story, I'm sure.
Yeah, we could spend a lot of time on that because it unfolded quickly, but there are a lot of moving parts to it, and each one of them goes quite deep, as you suggested in your introduction. Essentially what happened was after the news broke of the specific events here in New York City, Retail Council members reached out to us. We're in Albany, we're a statewide trade association. We don't feature our work here in New York City, but from time to time we're down here. And the question became, how do we as an industry, as the retail industry as a whole, not just a segment of it, or not just a specific brand, one or two specific brands, but how do we as an industry reach back out to the civil rights community, for example, to the community at large, whether we're talking about the civil rights folks, whether we're talking about the New York City Council, the incoming mayor, because at the same time New York City had its mayoral election and its election for comptroller, which was brought to bear on this incident, the state legislature, which tends to be my bailiwick. How do we reach out to them and tell them a couple of things? The first is exactly what you said. No, there is no such thing as a profiling policy. What do we have? How do we rebuild the trust? Well, what we have as an industry are the gold standard and best practices. And that's what we thought, okay, we have something to take back in this instant case to the civil rights community and say, wait a minute, let's all sit down and let's talk about the policies that we have specifically to protect all of us against profiling. And that's really where this began.
Mm-hmm. So the real question is now that we have it, I mean,
yes.
Where do we go and how do we make it impactful and really make a difference in the industry? And how do we integrate this so that it does make a difference and not just lose its true intention long term, as so many things do once the heat's off?
Great question, and a very good way to put it. I can tell you that had you been at the meetings that we had with the civil rights community
I was listening.
on the 22nd of November and then again on the 9th, that's their biggest question. How do we make sure that this thing has some tentacles and it sticks, and how do we get it beyond those retailers who I would like to say bravely stepped up to the plate, along with our friends from RILA. Lisa LaBruno was there with us at the meetings, and to just listen to what we had to say and add some perspective. And how do you do this? Well, what the civil rights folks would like to see, and I think a lot of the retailers would like to see, is that this spreads as far as it can. And I know from my years as a lobbyist in Albany with the state legislature that there will be some state lawmakers, that there will be some city politicians, particularly in this new administration, who want to see how retailers really put this into play. Right now, I think because we took the step to reach out first, it's all voluntary. You know, there's no obligation for anybody to do anything. But do you want to take that best practice that you have? Do you want to proudly tell your customers from every constituency that when you come into this store, we won't do this, we won't do that, we won't do this, we won't do that, we want your money. That's come in and shop. That's the welcoming, trustful atmosphere that I think the stores wanted to rebuild. And I think as people get more used to it and they see that it is not a legal document, it's not the Miranda rights, it's something that you just remind folks. You're not here because we profiled you. You're sitting in this detention room because we saw you steal something. That's why you're here. So that's what I think that ultimately is where this goes.
Do you see the nation's retailers getting behind this and supporting its execution, so to speak?
Well, some of the biggest brands in the country so far have. Right now, it's limited to New York State, and I dare say it's limited significantly to the properties in New York City, but that's not necessarily the case. Even up in Albany, I was doing some Christmas shopping and I saw the Bill of Rights as I walked in the vestibule of a major national retailer, and I wanted to stand by it and say, I wrote that, but I didn't. But it was good to see, you know, because you know this may be a bit of personal perspective coming into it because it's really been such a big part of my my job for the last 2 months. But do I think it should go beyond where it is now? Yeah. Are there stores that have committed to moving this beyond the 5 boroughs? Yes, there are. Will more come on board? It's up to them, you know, and they've had a lot of questions. Retail council members, I've spent a lot of time on the phone with general counsels, with loss prevention professionals from council member stores over the last couple months, telling them about it. And so much of what this is all about, you know, if you took the 8 or 9 points from that Bill of Rights, I think there are 8 bullet points. 6 of them are lifted almost verbatim from those best practice policies from different stores. It's an amalgam from the different policies.
So it's highlighting what already existed.
It's highlighting what already existed, and then we put in a couple things about New York State law that exists, including the licensure and the required licensure and training of security personnel. And then there's something in the state's general business law about reasonable times for detention. That's existing law. So we made up nothing in the Consumer Bill of Rights, the Customer Bill of Rights. It's all concepts, it's all a proffer from the retail industry that's been on that table for forever. It's just like, hey, let's tell everybody that you're all welcome here.
And the impact goes beyond loss prevention. I mean, by posting it in the vestibule, in effect, you're sending a message to the entire employee population of that store, of that chain.
That is absolutely true, and quite honestly, I think, and I don't want to speak for them because they're quite good spokespeople on their own, but the folks from the civil rights side of the equation, you know, at that first meeting that we had with them, we talked first about just expanding the training requirements so that they were more retail focused and that they were more focused on anti-profiling. One of the civil rights leaders stood up at the end of the table and he said, this is not just a loss prevention issue. It goes across every store employee. We want to feel comfortable from the minute we walk in. And it was interesting to hear that perspective, and quite honestly, it took away what I had planned to say for the next 2 hours, and we kind of had to regroup a little bit, but it made a good point that you just made. But ultimately, in the view, I think, of the state legislature, just based on my work with them over the years, it all redounds to how the loss prevention, the asset protection professional addresses a suspect. And it doesn't matter where it happened in the store. So part of my job as a lobbyist, really, and as for the retail industry, it's been my honor to defend the retail industry for 25 years. Now I'm working to defend this segment of it because it's reputational. where you start talking about, well, if it happened in this store, quite honestly, it could happen in any store. So the brand, it doesn't matter. The fact is that it happened. The fact is that it happened at the hands of a loss prevention person, and so now, in the minds of some state legislators and some city lawmakers, the goofy equation that they'll come up with is that all must be regulated in a much harsher way. My job will be to make sure that those regulations are fair, that they don't happen. I think it's already a fairly well-regulated industry in the state of New York. But we have some work to do, and I think the Customer's Bill of Rights is just the start.
And you think there may be potentially some legislation coming down the road, even more so?
We've already seen, the state legislature was not in active session from around June 20th of last year until today, being the first day of the 2014 session. In the interim, we've had a couple of bills that have percolated. One of them would more or less require loss prevention, NYPD to log in and out whenever they come in or out of a store. There's a second bill that monkeys around with the state's civil recovery statute. There's another bill that would limit the amount of time that that someone can be detained by loss prevention personnel. You know, do I see other things coming down the road? Yeah, I can imagine that you know, it's an election year in New York, so no press release goes unpunished. But I can imagine seeing a few bills that will have something to do with where a suspect is detained for questioning, because that's been a huge issue in the newspapers out here. So anything could happen in a legislative session, and in New York it always does. You know, I'm comforted by the fact that we're down 10 legislators right now because several of them are, you know, under investigation themselves. So we'll have a few things to talk about, but it could be an active session on this very issue. The Customer Bill of Rights is an early defense against it.
And what is your opinion, although that's not really your arena, but what is your opinion of NYPD's stop and frisk? I mean, with a new mayor, these issues right before the holidays, I mean, is there any discussion about that? Is the new mayor talking about it?
I have no. That's way out of my league. 3 months ago, this whole issue was somewhat out of my league. I was very good on organized retail theft, but that was about it. If you
That's another question for you.
We'll get there. But to your point, I don't know what he's going to do. What I do know is that on December 9th, when we had our press conference with Reverend Sharpton, with Mark Morial, with Scott Stringer, who's the city's new comptroller, and that's a citywide seat with quite a bit of authority, all three of them said that we will be having a meeting with Commissioner Bratton. So I said to one of them on the way out, do you think we should have asked him first if we could have this meeting? And they all nodded and laughed and said,
has he started yet?
He'll meet with us. I believe he has, or he started. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
And wasn't he associated with Giuliani's?
Yes, he was. But here he is back in New York.
Broken window theory, which kind of supports the stop and frisk, so to speak.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting with him to talk about what we've been asked to address with NYPD is blanket protocol. You know, but what our job from the Retail Council's perspective will be is to remind everybody, whether you're talking about the civil rights community or a state legislator or a city lawmaker, is that no two stores are alike. No two stores can follow the same protocol for their relationship with law enforcement from any agency, whether you're talking about a city, a state, a federal agency, whatever it is. No two stores in a single chain can really follow the same protocol, because the address of the store is going to say everything about how they deal with the police, and those are things that need to be kept proprietary. Are we as an industry willing to have a more global conversation about you know, hearing the wish list about what people would? Sure, I'll listen to anything. But at that point, it becomes our job to sort of filter that through and say, okay, thank you. Here's what's possible. Here's what's pie in the sky. And here, we're not even going to think about that as pie. We're going to think about it as there at that initial volunteer group, at the initial table of guinea pigs, but they were all voluntary. As they came on, you know, I do think, ultimately, do I see this gaining more traction? Yes. So if I'm an LP professional at a store that didn't sign on to this, that doesn't have this thing posted on the wall, retail council members are free to call me at any time, and I can answer any questions that they have about its genesis, about why, what does this mean, do I have any legal responsibilities? Not a lawyer, but this isn't a legal document. So there's nothing in stone on this thing. In fact, one of the points that we've raised with our friends on the civil rights side is that this has to be a living and breathing document. If they want to see this go national, which I think is on their list, then they have to understand that portions of it are New York specific. Portions of it will need to be changed, and I'm pretty confident that we can have those discussions.
So one last question.
Yes.
When does New York pass an ORC law? How close are we?
We have gotten it through the Senate every year for the past 3 years. And actually what we did was we split it, I think, into 6 different bills. We had that one giant bill. Giant omnibus bill in New York State is not going to happen. We are up against a really, really tough battle in one of our 2 houses. The state Senate has been a real partner on this thing. They've understood the depth and the breadth and the seriousness, not just to the retailer, but more importantly, and this is how we've established it, this is a consumer protection issue first. It's a state tax issue second. It's a retailer's issue third. And the Senate has been very welcoming of that, and we've gotten some, all 6 or 7 of the bills in the package have passed. In the state assembly, it's an entirely different kettle of fish. They look at things. It's very hard to get a new crime passed through the Senate, or through the assembly. I'm sorry. One of the bills, and I don't think I'm saying anything I shouldn't say. One of the bills has to do with increased penalties for theft through an emergency exit. And I honestly thought that last year we had a very good chance of getting that bill passed. A member of the assembly pulled me in to his office just before the session ended, and he said, "What I'm worried about is that you want to charge a felony to the scared 10-year-old who stole a Three Musketeers bar and ran out the emergency exit." As you can tell, I'm rarely speechless.
Yeah, that's a good response.
I didn't quite know what to say, and then I just looked at him and I said, "That's exactly what we want to do." Come on, Assemblyman. But you know what? New York State does not move very quickly, and I think with every year we are chipping away at this idea that ORC is not shoplifting is not ORC, the breadth of the problem. Did the incidents of the last couple of months put a stake in the progress? Yeah, I think it did. And I think the biggest reason that the Retail Council got on board as quickly and as fervently as we have is to continue the momentum forward so that we can continue to move our ORC and our LP agenda forward on behalf of our members, and yet respond constructively, proactively, and I hope cooperatively with the civil rights community to show that we have a lot to show. We have a great story as an industry to tell, and I think the Customer's Bill of Rights is a really tangible way to do that.
Fantastic.
Great.
Ted, thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
That's it for this session of the LPNN.